This is Truth in Media. I'm Ben Swann, and on today's show, we are talking one-on-one with Libertarian presidential candidate Adam Kokesh.
America is too good for this government. Those are very important concepts to separate. America is not our government. We are not defined by the tumor on the body politic. We are better than that, and we don't have to be united under one government to be united in American values.
He's going to break down his policy ideas, and believe me, they are something like you've never heard before. Our interview with Adam Kokesh today on Truth in Media. Welcome to the show. Today we are talking one-on-one with Libertarian candidate for president Adam Kokesh. And Adam and I sat down and had a discussion about his policy platform, which is really beyond just calling it radical. It is something that you've probably never heard any presidential candidate ever before propose. I'm willing to bet that. It is an idea that he is laying out in great detail, by the way, that kind of goes beyond anything that you've ever heard of. I want to let him tell you about that coming up in just a minute. But one of the things that kind of sets the backdrop for this is the recent back and forth between Tulsi Gabbard, who's running for president on the Democratic side, and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who of course has run for president a number of times and was the Democratic nominee in 2016. Now, what brought this up was Clinton essentially attacked Gabbard, saying that Congresswoman Gabbard is an agent of Russia and is being groomed by Vladimir Putin to make a third-party run for the presidency, to play spoiler as a disruptor. But something that really stood out to me in that attack was the fact that Clinton actually brought up 2016 Green Party candidate Jill Stein when she was discussing this as well, essentially saying that Stein was, in fact, absolutely no question about it, used by the Russians to steal the election and give it to Donald Trump. That's essentially what she was saying.
They're also going to do third-party again. And I'm not making any predictions, but I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary and are grooming her to be the third-party candidate. She's the favorite of the Russians. They have a bunch of sites and bots and other ways of supporting her so far. And that's assuming Jill Stein will give it up, which she might not, because she's also a Russian asset.
Agent,
yeah, she's a Russian asset. I mean, totally. And so they know they can't win without a third-party candidate. And so I don't know who it's going to be, but I will guarantee you they'll have a vigorous third-party challenge in the key states that they most need it.
What's interesting about this, of course, is that that's not only not true, but it works to undermine the legitimacy of all third-party candidates, whether Green Party or Libertarian candidates or Constitution Party. It attacks the very core of those parties to say that they are not legitimate efforts to impose or to bring new ideas into the political arena. And instead, that anyone who is voting third party or running on a third party ticket is a traitor, is betraying the country, is working against the system. Now, look, anyone who's running on the Green Party or the Libertarian Party is certainly a disruptor. Go back to 2016, as I've reported extensively, and wasn't one of the few people to do so. About 6 million votes were cast for third-party candidates, the largest number in modern history. And what was really fascinating is if you take the 5 swing states that Trump won over Clinton, the number of people who voted Libertarian and Green Party far exceeded the margin of victory between Trump and Clinton. So certainly third-party candidates had a big role there. But to call them spoilers is just disingenuous, because to do so acts as if the Libertarian Party and the Green Party exist in some way to serve the two-party system and therefore have no right to exist because it disrupts the two-party system, or that you as a voter have no right to vote for someone other than the candidates in this two-party system. And so as we look at what Clinton said, I really want to keep an eye on it going into 2020, because I believe what we're going to see is really the mainstream media playing along with this narrative that anyone who votes for a third-party candidate is essentially treasonous. and is harming the country to do so, and is falling for some kind of elaborate trap set up by the Russian government or some kind of foreign government. Having said that, a few weeks ago I interviewed John McAfee, who's running for president on the Libertarian side, and after that interview aired, I heard from Adam Kokesh and his campaign, who, by the way, Adam is also running for the Libertarian nomination for president. And Adam wanted to share his platform. Now, I've known Adam a long time. In fact, full disclosure here, Adam Kokesh is one of the first people who really introduced me to the ideas of libertarianism. And he is, without question, a purist libertarian through and through. And so it's my pleasure to have him on today. Adam Kokesh, thanks for joining us. Well, I want to start here, Adam, with this discussion about Hillary Clinton and Tulsi Gabbard and the claims that were made. And I want to get your take on this, because it does feel to me as if what Clinton has done is tried to set this thing up in a way that says to the public, you can't vote third party, and anyone who is running on that third party ticket is essentially a threat to the nation. I think you and I would both agree they're not a threat to the nation, but they're certainly a threat to this two-party duopoly that we have in place. What say you?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's just a part of the general process of the duopoly maintaining its position, staying entrenched by warding off any potential threat to overturning the duopoly. But more importantly, we have a chance to overturn the entire system in 2020. Like I said, with this campaign, we are turning the election into a referendum on whether or not the federal government should be allowed to exist at all. I mean, people like you and me who understand the importance of the question you ask are going to be really concerned with the answer. But for the average American, 40% of whom as eligible voters never vote in presidential elections, they know it's a waste of their time. They know that this drama nonsense back and forth is all silly, designed to manipulate them. It's time we give them a real alternative in the presidential election. And that's someone who's going to throw the ring in the fire and say, we don't need a president at all.
Okay, so Adam, let's talk about your platform, because it is a very interesting platform, no question about that. Probably one of the most unique platforms anyone's going to hear about. And essentially, kind of looking at it, it looks like it is a, for lack of a better term, kind of a one position platform, which is to peacefully and through a process completely dissolve the federal government of the United States. Is that right? And if so, how would that work?
Right. It's basically a bankruptcy process. If the American people decide to elect me as president, I will not be president. I'm going to be resigning on day one. We declare the federal government null and void. It is now a custodial institution. I resign from the presidency to become custodian of the federal government, to serve as the bankruptcy agent that would take us through a peaceful, orderly, responsible process that leaves us with 50 independent states and up to 562 sovereign native nations. But just as importantly, the federal government has stolen a lot from all of us. And no one is talking about taking it back. This is taking it back. We liquidate all the assets of the federal government. Every American is issued 1,000 tokens of AmeriCoin, a cryptocurrency, which is the only one we accept for the liquidated assets. So independent of the inequalities of the current dollar system, every American is issued an equal claim to the assets of the federal government that have been stolen from us. We are taking back what has been taken, and we are taking the toys away from those who use them to exploit us.
Okay, so if I understand your platform correctly then, essentially you would go through a process of dissolving the federal government, and then you would dissolve every federal agency, it sounds like, and then you would issue this thing called the AmeriCoin, and it's 1,000 AmeriCoin to every U.S. citizen. Is that how this works?
Value is the backing of the liquidated assets of the federal government. All the weaponry, according to the Department of Defense, that is not legitimately applicable for defensive purposes is going to be de-weaponized and liquidated. Those that are not will be apportioned among the states going to the National Guards to be more in line with the founders' vision for this country of a decentralized, militia-based defense. But the lands, the buildings, everything. I mean, you look at the Western states, the federal government owns the majority of the land by acreage. It is disgusting. It is an illegitimate property rights claim that has been stolen from the American people. That gets auctioned off. Every American has an equitable claim to that. And so Americoin is the only currency we will accept in that bankruptcy liquidation process. So immediately, we are not trying to launch another altcoin or even something that would compete with Bitcoin. This is a currency that has an immediate value backing and a very discrete purpose. The funds collected from this go to Social Security as a spun-off institution. So in a sense, we don't dissolve everything. A lot of agencies are localized down to the states. Social Security, for example, is spun off as the means of dispersing these funds until they're no longer available. Whether Americoin is relevant in the long-term currency market, I'm not a central planner. I certainly won't force it on anybody, but it has a very discrete purpose and may have some long-term value, certainly in providing the transition to a more decentralized system of government.
Okay, so then essentially what you're saying is this would be a process where you become the custodian of the government rather than the president of the country. You would become the custodian of the government, and then as custodian of the government, there would be another election in 4 years for another custodian? Is that what you're saying?
No, this is it. This is the last federal election we ever have.
The last one under this system?
The bankruptcy is laid out in detail from start to finish by the time any American is ever asked to vote on it. And that would be for May next year at the Libertarian National Convention. And I hope anybody who's listening, I know you have a beautifully engaged audience, and that they know the only opportunity to vote in the Libertarian primary is as a delegate at the National Convention in May. And by then, we will have the bankruptcy process laid out in as much detail as possible for the time. So day one, federal laws are unenforceable. The authority of the federal government goes away. A lot of federal agencies are very simple. You collect all the records, you send everybody home, you shut the doors, that's it. EPA, DEA, DOE, a lot of those federal regulatory agencies. The military is a major logistical process where we bring all the troops home from abroad, shut down the military bases, and then apportion the defensive resources appropriately among the remaining states and sovereign native tribes. The CIA, the FBI, the NSA, obviously these are huge knots to untangle. And one of the best things about this platform is we get to release all the records. You will have all the documents, but that has to be done, of course, in a responsible way where you redact personal private information that the government shouldn't have had in the first place. So in order to accelerate the shutdown process, we're going to allow agencies to take all of their records and send them to one central clearinghouse that will filter them appropriately and release as much as possible responsibly online as soon as possible. So there are a couple long tails, if you will, to this process, but this is the last federal election we will ever have. And to be realistic, I should point out one more thing about the timing here. I believe we can win the nomination. In fact, right now, we're far in the lead, and I think we've almost got it locked down with the way that we have delegates lined up. But with a nominee for 2020 for the Libertarian Party on a platform that can bring in independents and traditional non-voters, I mean, on the trail, more than anything else, I hear, I don't normally vote, but I would come out and vote for that. And I think we can get 10%. I think we can have a breakout year for the LP in 2020 that sets us up for a win in 24. That's what we're working towards. I think a Black Swan event would be required for a victory in 2020. We will be ready for that. But without it, we will keep running until we win on this platform or the federal government ceases to exist one way or another.
Yeah, because that was going to be my next question for you, was what has kind of been the response been like so far, and including within the Libertarian Party itself. Just curious as to what the response has been like. But that aside, it sounds like you've already answered that. What would you say to people who are hearing about this? Because clearly there are going to be people who hear this, Adam, who are going to say, okay, sounds like beyond a radical idea, right? This actually sounds like a scary idea to them. Dissolve the federal government? I mean, we wouldn't even exist as a country, they would think, if the federal government did not exist. How would we exist? How would we be protected? What would the country even look like? I mean, you're not just proposing an idea here that is, to some people, kind of far out there. To some people, this is unfathomable, what you are kind of describing and setting up here as a policy platform. What would you say to those people?
Well, first of all, America is too good for this government. Those are very important concepts to separate. America is not our government. We are not defined by the tumor on the body politic. We are better than that, and we don't have to be united under one government to be united in American values. Localization is the cure for polarization because people of differing views don't have to fight over who's going to get to force their will on the other. When government is localized to the community level, a community is a voluntary association. It becomes a voluntary organization, no longer a coercive, violent authority. That's the future. This is the continuation of the American Revolution. Dare I say, the final American Revolution. And I would quote Lilla Watson, who said, "If you have come here to help, you are wasting your time. But if you understand that your liberation is tied up in mine, let us work together." And before I would ask anyone for help in this campaign, I would make sure that they know the significance of what they are signing up for, what they are getting involved in, because this really is tied to the highest dynamics of human progress, of evolving past violence, past statism, to a society of greater love and respect and harmony. This is the revolution you've been waiting for.
Adam Kokesh, Libertarian candidate for president, thank you so much for your time. And by the way, before we go, tell people where they can get more information if they want to learn more about your policy platform. Where do they go?
Well, thank you so much, Ben. And I will first have to plug you and your show here and say, for someone still working so hard in independent media, I know that you depend on an active and engaged audience. So thank you to you and your audience for making your show possible. Keep up the great work. If people want to connect with me, the website is thefreedomline.com. All three words, thefreedomline.com. Thanks again for the opportunity, Ben.
Adam, thanks. And that is our show for you today. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out truthinmedia.com and go there to support our sponsors. It is with their help, I remind you every time, that we continue to restore truth in media. I will see you back here next time.